We stumbled into agentic architectures before agentic architectures were a thing. The most popular filter that our customers used was hot tubs.
This is VentureBeat's Beyond the Pilot, Enterprise AI in Action. I'm Sam Ridavine.
I'm Matt Marshall.
Today's episode is presented by Outshift by Cisco, Cisco's emerging tech incubation engine and driver of agentic AI, quantum, next-gen infra, and beyond. Hi everyone, today we're talking with Pranav Pathak, who's been in the trenches of AI long before it was cool. Pranav leads product AI development at Booking.com, where they're orchestrating billions of daily predictions across everything from ranking hotels to working out if you want a hot tub in your room even. For us, the thing that makes Pranav really interesting and Booking.com really interesting is that they're dealing with AI from every single angle, customer experience, support, partner relations, not just stuff in the lab. Pranav has seen the difference between AI that demos well and AI that actually works in production, with millions of people trying to book their vacations. Pranav, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Super excited to be here and super excited to talk today.
We're very happy to have you here. So let's jump in. How do you approach travel recommendations in this sort of new age of ChatGPT and Gen AI and all the other sort of things that we've got out there now?
Awesome. Love it. Straight to the point. So the recommendation space has evolved quite a bit, right? Even if you consider 4 years ago, it was a lot of invisible user features, clicks, and so on and so forth, not really understanding what the user's intent is, but guessing. With all of the chat and AI applications coming in, we can pretty much ask our users what they want in free text, right? And that fundamentally changes dimensions that we can now express with recommendations, things we can do. We can be a lot more specific around what we want to recommend. So instead of, for example, the launch that I'm the most proud of at Booking is we have a collection of about 200, 250 filters that you can filter a property by. Uh, as a human, you're not going to go through 200 or 250, right? So one way for searching for those filters is we introduced a new free text box. And you can type in whatever you want, and we'll find the right filters for you. And that becomes such an important cue for personalization in terms of what you're looking for in your own words rather than a click stream. That is just a completely different system, and that brings a new flavor to recommendations. That's far better than what it used to be even 2 years ago.
Do you find that to be sort of the best way of determining what customers want?
Um, It is one of the very powerful ways of determining what customers want. We've never had a window into conversations before, right? So, A, what are we recommending is less guess and much more practical. B, what features we want to build is also much more practical. So, when we did the free text filters thing, the most popular filter that our customers used was hot tubs. We didn't actually have hot tubs as a filter on the platform, right? So this was our cue around this is where demand is, this is what we want to build, and now the hot tub filter is live.
I
So
would have
it's
thought that was
a
obvious, no, that everyone wants a hot tub.
I had no idea. I had never searched for a hot tub in my
Understood.
room, honestly.
Pranav, we're 2 or 3 years in to this revolution, right? Gen AI was set off by OpenAI's great app. What do you think this is done for you in terms of metrics and success? I remember talking with your team a decade ago about how you were on the bleeding edge of machine learning and AI. This was pre Gen AI. So you've always been pushing the boundaries, especially on customer support, right? In terms of automating that customer support side. Can you talk a little bit about what Gen AI has done specifically on the metric side?
Yeah. Let's take the example of topic detection for customer service, right? Like the flow that usually happens in any CS organization is the customer is going to tell you what the problem is. You're going to try and guess if you have the tools to solve that problem self-service. If you don't, you send it to a CS agent. Now, in our case, the pre-Gen AI tooling for detecting that topic was basically a small language model, something the scale and size of BERT, that did a job of, okay, here's the free text, what's the topic the customer needs help with, and where do we need to route them? We're seeing after LLMs a 2x increase in topic detection there. And if we can get the topic right, we can get the tooling right, we can increase the number of self-service that happens on the platform, which means we can actually make more of our CIS agents available to have actual conversations with customers for whom we don't have a very good tool to offer, that we don't want to automate. Because what if you're a family stuck outside a hotel 2 in the night? We don't want to give you a self-service tool for that, right? We want to make sure we have the human connection with you. So it makes the agent's time much more available. It makes the agents much more productive, and it makes customers who don't really want that human interaction find the right self-service tool as well. So that's just one example of how it's just jumped by 2x, right, of what it used to be. So it's become a lot more powerful in our CS systems as well.
Yeah, and then fill that out? So if you have a 2x increase in accuracy on determining someone's intent, does that mean that you can service 2 times as many, customer service calls? Is it twice as fast? How does that filter through the business? Just to really kind of pin the extent to which this Gen AI revolution has produced real results for you.
So yeah, it directly impacts the volumes, right? It's not a 2x increase, because if we were not confident of the topic before, we would tag it as other, and then other goes to a human agent. We're doing far less of that as well. But whenever we nail a topic and it goes to a human agent, A, it comes with all of the context of what the problem is, so that the users don't have to repeat that. B, because we've automated a lot of the topics which have that self-serve tooling, that's about 1.5, 1.7x of what we were doing before. That's 1.5, 1.7x bandwidth freed up, right? So that really starts to compound. It's not exactly a 2x jump there, but the length of the calls that we're sending and the relevance of them is far better also for our retention, right? One of the things we've seen is the better we are at customer service, the more loyal our customers are. So this is direct impact on our long-term customer retention as well.
I see. So you've seen that in retention metrics as well. Any specifics there that you can share?
Uh, I don't have the numbers of the record of the exact multiplier of CS metrics, also because it's a long-term evolving metric, right? Like, you don't book a trip more than twice or thrice a year if you're an average user. So we're yet to see the hard concretized numbers because a lot of the tech is new, but we're seeing directional correlation for sure.
So Pranav, what sort of stack do you build to be able to do that? I'm really curious. Obviously, you guys have got search. I'm guessing RAG. What are the key parts of your stack for that?
Awesome. Let's kind of dissect the stack start to finish, right? When a user writes a query, first we have an LLM orchestrator that determines what type of a query it is, what special agent categories we're going to have to call, what RAG mechanisms, so on and so forth. So all starts with an orchestrator. Goes into a moderation layer, both for everything in and out that we want to send to our customers and that we get from customers as well. So we want to make sure we don't send any PII, any identifiable information, anything that's private to the LLM. So that moderation layer happens. Then the intent of the customer query is determined. And then we'll take a decision of whether to call a tool or whether to use RAG to give the right relevant result, and so on and so forth. For each of those, we either use an internal API or we use a smaller or more specialized LLM. And once the orchestrator defines what tools to call, what LLMs or what RAG systems, it tries to construct a response. So in the case of recommendations, for example, we know the intent is recommendations. We'd rather rely on our internal system to give those recommendations, not have them produced by an LLM. But then the orchestrator will synthesize the explainability of why this is the right recommendation for the user. So the stack is kind of layered as the user interaction, the moderation, the orchestration, then the agents, the RAG, and the APIs.
So that's kind of a very agentic step. Did you guys start out like aiming to do agents? Like, how long have you been doing this sort of agentic style of doing it?
Right. We stumbled into agentic architectures before agentic architectures were a thing, because the first use case we started with was conversational recommendations. And one of our core philosophies was we don't want to use a generic recommendation system. We don't want to rely on the LLMs. Whatever we recommend as booking should be bookable on booking.com. The price should be right, and the recommendation should be right within the context of the customer. So we started with an architecture of you have to call a tool if this is the intent you detect, and this is how you've kind of parsed the structure. That was very, very similar to the first few agentic architectures that came out in terms of reason and define a tool call. So we've had that system already before the more mature agentic SDKs. And we've kind of been able to scale that system quite well as well because it was so close in architecture that with a few tweaks, we now have a full agentic stack.
This series is presented by Outshift, Cisco's emerging tech incubation engine and driver of the Internet of Agents, an open, interoperable internet for agent-to-agent collaboration. Learn more about the Internet of Agents and explore how agentic systems are the future at outshift.cisco.com.
You mentioned that you stumbled upon agents, Pranav, early, and that you've adjusted. With so much coming out, right? Sam Altman was on stage of the OpenAI Dev Day a couple of days ago, talking about how the vast majority of agentic efforts in production are failing, and so that's why they came up with their agent SDK, their agent kit. And I know you've been working closely with OpenAI, but I'm just curious, what are the frameworks and best practices that you've embraced since those early days?
So we have a couple agents live already that are like pure good agentic infrastructure on the platform. And then we have our trip planners and so on and so forth, which still use some of our infrastructure from the early days. We've been very clear about how data flows between systems, right? What's the predictable nature of responses that we can offer between the systems? Almost everything is JSON led except for the last layer, which is orchestrating the communication. So we try to structure that communication as cleanly as possible between the agents and also with our other systems and APIs. That's the hard part. You kind of really need to nail the structures you want, and you need to fine tune and make sure that the LLM is amenable to those structures. Well, once that happens, that really starts to make a lot of the agentic systems work. We're also very mindful of where we build reusable agents versus where we build something that's very task specific. Whatever can generalize does get generalized. I think the big question that us and everyone in the industry is struggling with is how deep in specialization an agent goes, right? Do you build it very, very specialized and bespoke, and then you have an army of 100 agents? Or do you still keep it general enough and you have 5 agents which are good at generalized tasks, but then you have to orchestrate a lot around them? That's a balance that I think we're still trying to figure out, as is the rest of the industry.
Yeah, have you decided to go to a swarm of agents in making sure those agents are as specific as possible, or is there a reason why you haven't gone to having a specific agent for a specific task? In other words, going really narrow. What's wrong with that approach? Could you talk that through?
Right. One of our principles is anyone in our tech and product teams who wants to build an agent should be able to build an agent. And then if we're making that very, very specific, we take a massive hit on reusability. So everyone's kind of building their own agent, so to speak. We don't expect for the entire organization to know how to build good agents. So as much hand-holding as possible. If we can build something that's generic enough that they can tweak by themselves without breaching guardrails while knowing how it's going to react, that's the preference. So this is more an organizational scale decision at the moment than an architectural one. But yeah, we want everyone to play with GenAI. We don't want to be the gatekeepers of GenAI with a few specific teams being able to do that.
So I'm really curious in this world where you and many people in the organization are building things. How do you determine sort of what to buy, what to build? From what you're sort of saying, you're not building your own LLMs. How are you making those decisions?
So the way I view it is, well, there's actually two decision parameters, right? One, is this something that is the core of our business that we are specialists in, that we know how to do better than others? If yes, then we're going to do that, right? Versus, is this something that every business needs to some extent and someone else is going to have the specialization for doing that better than us? Then we don't want to venture into that territory, right? Two, fine tuning models, distilling, pre training, these are all open conversations. But Training a foundation model takes a lot more than just travel data. It takes a lot of infrastructure, expertise, scale, scientific research. It's not as adjacent to travel as we would like it to be. So we collaborate quite intensively with OpenAI. That's known to everyone. We have a bunch of other smaller models as well. We invest in the fine tuning and pre training and making sure that the outputs are travel specific, but not necessarily in spinning up a foundation model from scratch, at least today, right? Um, the same for all of our monitoring and evaluations and so on and so forth. If it's general purpose monitoring that someone else is better at building than we are, that is a horizontal capability across organizations, we're going to buy it. If it's our moderation or our brand guidelines and so on and so forth, or we want some specific evaluations to be very enforced, we build the evaluations ourselves. We don't buy that. That's the general framework. That's one. Two, at this point, with everything that's happening with AI, we are a little bit averse to walking through one way doors. We want for as many of our decisions to be reversible as possible, as is everyone else in the industry. We don't want to get locked into a decision that we cannot reverse 2 years from now. So anything that forces us through a one way door is a lot more scrutiny than anything that's a reversible decision.
How does things like latency enter into that? Because my guess is that a big factor in everything you're doing is making sure you're getting the sort of response, the recommendation in a very short time. People are not going to sit on the site for a long time.
Right. Latency is very, very use case specific, right? If we're using AI for product descriptions, for example, we don't much care for the latency because we can cache all of that. We have a finite set of products, but we care a lot more for factual accuracy and for not having hallucinations and so on and so forth, and the richness of the model itself. So we would rather use a very large model that then is much slower, but we'll do that as a bad job because we can cache all of that data. But then for things like search or for recommendations, we want to be fast because that determines the end user experience. No one's patient. So there we'll use much smaller models, but then much more task focused. So a model for intent extraction, a model for search query understanding. And because they're so much smaller and they're so much more specialized, they have much lower latency. So we try to balance that use case by use case. Anything that is real time, we try to minimize the latency as much as possible.
Pranav, I wanted to double click on the latency question. I think there's a lot of chatter in the industry about the constraints in GPUs, right? I'm wondering if that even is an issue for you. If you're focused on latency, maybe you're not as focused on or worried about the huge explosion of token use by some of these reasoning models. Sounds like you have so much structure in terms of all the variables that your users are searching for that you actually don't even need reasoning models. Don't worry about tokens. You're just focused on latency. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, we're very conscious of what model we use for what use case, right? And we try to use the smallest model possible for the use case at hand with the highest level of accuracy and output quality. We would, for example, never use something as heavy as GPT-5 for just topic detection or for entity extraction. That's going to be much smaller models. And that A brings down costs. So there's a business incentive to do that. B brings down the latency. So there's a user incentive to doing that as well. Um, we've not had the challenge of using too many tokens or being specifically worried about tokens because of this approach. We have an intake process internally. My team works through everyone at Booking building with large language models on what model they need to use and how and why and so on and so forth. We don't have open access, free for all, use whatever model you want. We're very mindful of that consumption, both as business sanity and as user experience sanity. That helps a lot.
How do you evaluate that? Like, especially for people listening who are just getting into this, what sort of advice would you say to, organizations that this is how we evaluate that this model is good enough to give us a set of JSON structured intents back, whereas this other one is better for kind of chat. We're prepared to go a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit more expensive for something that's chat. I'm curious, sort of, how do you do that?
Awesome. Kind of three layers for that, right? One, just logically, does it make sense to use a very large model and what are the trade offs there? That kind of already eliminates the size question to a large degree. And then when you get to the nuance, second, good evals. Even if it's for one use case, if you're doing one use case that's going to have a JSON in a specific format, do really good evals around that. And that'll give you kind of a benchmark of what size of model works for that kind of an output. Um, and then once you've done those evals specifically for that use case, you have a reference use case that says, okay, anything similar to this is probably going to be the best bet. Third, everything needs to be put in front of customers, right? Because the evals can tell you this is factually accurate, this sounds good, there's nothing here that we don't want to say, it's all moderated, all well and good. But if the tone of voice doesn't resonate with customers, the product is going to tank. So some experimentation on tone of voice, on quality of output is required with the end customer before saying, yeah, this is the model that best fits this specific tone we want to invoke. So those three checks kind of give a reference architecture for what sort of use cases fall into what bucket. And then the next time you see that, you develop the specific evals, but also you start at a much cleaner baseline.
What about for like in deciding what you go for API? Like obviously you're not going to use GPT-5, but what decides, going from GPT-4 mini versus saying, no, actually we want to serve this on-prem ourselves or in the cloud ourselves kind of thing. That's what I was trying to get at before.
Right, got it. One, we want to keep experimenting with what sort of models are out there, right? So for my teams, we have capacity reserved for what's out there. You're going to test it, you're going to find out, and you're going to put it in front of customers. That gives us a lot of valuable data around what specifically is working and what isn't. Now, with anything that's open source versus closed source, there are some constraints of what you can do with the actual model, the degree to which you want to fine tune it, the degree to which you want to kind of do your own bespoke customizations on top of it. So, if a use case requires a lot more customization than what a standard API call would offer, then that typically becomes a good use case for in house. Uh, my frame of reference there is we try to avoid having a small in-house model for very specific use cases. We would rather have them generalize as well, because someone somewhere is going to forget that this use case exists. Maintenance is going to be an issue. There's a lot of logging, a lot of sort of governance and accountability around language models in general. For maintenance sake, my preference is to collapse the models into as few as possible. If you want to really tamper with a model and you need kind of the open weights and the open architectures and open infrastructure for that specific tampering, then yeah, it makes sense to have it in-house. There's some regulatory cases as well where we have to be in-house. So depending on what the law says, that adds another dimension as well. But for most businesses, if they're just starting out with LLMs, or if they're just venturing into starting to build all of these architectures, APIs do just fine. There's enough customization with APIs that you can already get a lot of leverage out of before you decide you want to go do more with that. That's really for the last 5% of the finish line that you want to actually tamper with the model to the extent that this question becomes something you should think about.
Pranav, I think you were referring at one point when we were talking in prep for this about the 6-month period where you were struggling between human and LLM disagreement. I think it was in the fine tuning process of some of these in-house models. Could you talk a little bit about that process, why it was so important to kind of overcome that challenge, and what you've learned from that?
Right. So, like I was saying before, we do evals for everything. And a large part of doing good evaluations is having a human gold standard that can tell you that the evaluation is the correct evaluation. Before LLMs, this was not a problem because you're solving essentially a classification problem, very cut and dry. Where does this message belong? Bucket A or bucket B? With LLMs, again, like I was saying before, with customer service, we can do a lot more fine grained topic detection or a lot more fine grained understanding of things, or the conversation itself becomes a lot more subjective. So, how do you train the humans on such fine grained differences has been a challenge. We've seen disagreements from evaluator to evaluator, between evaluator and the model, where we thought the model was actually the right judge and not the human. and between product teams and human evaluators who've been specifically trained on that job. So it's hard to get agreement on what good looks like at that level of fidelity and at that level of sort of subjectivity. So standardizing that has been a challenge. That's been the 6 month back and forth around what does good look like for our human evaluations. How are we going to benchmark the work that the humans do for those evaluations? How do we know that the right quality is coming through, and what is quality even? That's been the struggle for a long time until we could set that system up. Once it's set, it becomes a lot easier because you're in the rhythm, but setting that up is difficult.
Pranav, another thing that you're working on apart from the LLMs, you've obviously got, you talked about these sort of JSON intents coming out and stuff like that. My guess is that you've got this whole recommendation system, you've got this whole sort of RAG system going on. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit about that?
Yeah. Again, begins with we specialize in travel. We have a lot of data around travel. That's where our sort of moat comes from, and that's what we want to show to our customers. But we have so much data around travel that it becomes important that it's searchable, indexable, that we can actually do the things we want to do with the data, right? Three big use cases for us around really leveraging our data is questions being answered about properties around attractions, whatever, what have you, and comparing between multiple options, and then sifting and finding through reviews, right? All of that requires that we go deep into our data and surface what's relevant. We have information that comes to us straight from the property or from the seller around what the catalog item is like. We have information coming in from questions being answered from the seller or from the property manager. And then we have all of the reviews that all of our customers have left. Some hotels have 5,000, 6,000 reviews, even, which is a wealth of information that is not captured in what the hotel is actually telling us, right? So we want to make all of that searchable. We want to make all of that indexable. So we basically create embeddings out of every review, out of every property on site, and we use that to power those features around comparison, around generating descriptions, around answering questions, and so on and so forth. So we've had a few iterations of how we want to do the RAG process, what's the data we want to put in, how we want to manage the entire system, and so on and so forth. And the real test of that has really been, can we compare between two properties on any axis that our user wants us to compare in? And now that we've solved that challenge, the next outlook is, can we actually search for any property that our user wants to search for with any dimension that the user wants to search for? And we've kind of slowly been progressing in our product thinking in terms of how we want to build a newer, better way for users to search. There's a small experiment running now on AI mode search, which leverages some of these capabilities. I'm hoping for that to expand further as well.
What are you learning from that? Like what suddenly now are customers asking that you didn't expect that they would ask in the past, or asking you to do comparisons, that kind of things?
The traditional Booking.com search box is basically you enter in a very specific destination and very specific dates for where you want to go. You hit search, you get a catalog exposed. And then you have the filters to be able to customize whatever you want to customize. That's the second add on. But that's not how travel happens, right? When I'm first thinking about traveling, I'm more thinking I want to go to a beach sort of a vibe. I want to go somewhere that's 2 to 3 hours away. Not in this season, maybe. But generally, I want to kind of start a lot more broad than I want to go to the south of Spain or to Barcelona on these specific dates, right? We're seeing that that flexibility is important. That flexibility was hard to do before we set all of these infrastructures in place because we have a massive catalog as well. So if you were to search for anywhere with a beach in Europe, just the amount of results we would have would overwhelm our search infrastructure. So these sorts of approaches help us kind of triangulate what we want to do and how we want to sift through those destinations and the level of flexibility we want to give to our users. At this point, you don't need to know the exact dates. You don't need to know the exact destination. Type in something that's a lot more broad. Beach vibes in Spain, early October, I can work with that. That was not possible before.
Pranav, we're kind of curious about what you think the next steps are for your journey. Your team has been really advanced in ML throughout optimizing these personalization efforts. You know, a lot of teams go through this trough of disillusionment, right? Gen AI comes, hey, we're going to slap this magical AGI onto on top of our processes, and we'll have perfection. But then actually nothing happens, because then it turns out you have to get back to what your customers actually need, and some of the processes that
Hmm.
you would normally be doing, and need to improve those. Where are you in that journey? What are the challenges you face still?
So we've had those moments, right? We've learned the hard way, right? And twice over, because first we've learned it for our teams building the ML products. Second, we've learned it as an organization. So we've gone through this curve twice of something new is happening. We need to react to it. Let's build something. Let's see what happens. Throw it out there, and then nothing happens, right? That's caused us to have sort of a framework for how we handle incoming use cases. We're a lot more pragmatic in terms of what product problems we want to solve than we used to be at the start of Gen AI. We've taken some good important pivots as well. We started with the AI trip planner back in 2023. That was an important moment for us as a business to start investing in generative AI infrastructures. That was a very good step at the time, but that was a completely disconnected product, right? You would almost start an interaction fresh with the AI trip planner, and you kind of sort of stay there, and then you don't really know what to do once it recommends that set of properties. Our approach there has evolved to much more embedded conversational products. So you won't see specifically a big bold banner that announces the AI trip planner anymore on the site, but you start to find it in a lot more tactical places, like just on the property page after you've scanned the information. Do you have a question? This is where you can ask it, and that invokes the planner. So we've kind of seen from a user perspective, being contextual is a lot more important. On the technology for perspective, we've also seen the more we can anticipate, the more we can predict, and the more we can show to our customers, the faster we are at, and the more agile we are at adjusting to everything that's happening. MCP servers came in. We dove in pretty soon with how we wanted to play with MCP servers, built a few things already in house. So then, when the OpenAI launch that you're seeing now happened, we had the infra in place, right? So, being super anticipatory about what tech is out there and what's coming has become very important for us as a business. We do a lot of things that our customers don't see just because we want to play around with the infrastructure. We spend some cycles and some budget on that. And then on the customer side, we're a lot more pragmatic about what it is that we want to launch and what problem it's going to solve.
I've got a big question around memory, right? We talk about some of these challenges and integrating that experience, that initial experience in 2023 with everything else, right? You have so much information about what the users have done in the past, what their preferences are, where they're located. There's this need for memory. And it sounds like you have been working on memory. Can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that, while at the same time seeing that OpenAI, Gemini, and some of these other places where users are going to be discovering you, right? There was the apps unfold from OpenAI at the Dev Day recently, right? You were a big showcased customer. Where I will be going to OpenAI and expecting OpenAI to have that memory. Can you talk a little bit about how you build amidst these big foundational shifts from players like OpenAI?
Very candidly, with where the user creates a footprint and how that footprint is transferred between, let's say, OpenAI and Booking.com or Google and Booking.com, is an answer that no one knows as of now, right? Because it's a multi-layered, multifaceted problem. How do you handle consent? How do you handle data governance? How do you make sure you respect the user's privacy? Uh, in the absence of all of those frameworks, everyone's kind of defaulting to, yeah, we want to keep control of what we share of the user and be very explicit with the user, right? So in the OpenAI experience, you'll see that it kind of asks you explicitly to log in or to kind of consent to using Booking.com with all that it entails in terms of that consent. And then on our own platforms as well, memory is still a pretty complicated setup, right? And it has to be, because there's the long-term memory of the customer you want to preserve. What's their Genius status? Are they a verified user of some specific offerings? Are they always traveling with disability access required? Those are kind of the hard preferences that we have to respect, that we have to preserve, right? Those are the immutable parts of memory. Then there's kind of the middle-ish where there's a longer term preference. For example, budgets, the kind of star rating you want to go to, and so on and so forth, those don't change per trip per se, but those evolve over time, right? Like I've gone from being student to now having a family of my own, very different budgets, very different constraints, right? But you want to keep that thread evolving for the customer.
Yeah.
And then there's something that's very trip focused, what I need in the here and now. I only want hot tubs this one time because it's just me and my partner traveling, right? So there's kind of those three dimensions to memory that we need to manage, and then there's the conversational versus conventional aspect of it. And we want to be very mindful of not being creepy with memory, right? That's ground rule. Don't be creepy when you're collecting customer information. So manage that consent well. Uh, when I'm adding something that's, let's say, a transient filter that's relevant to one trip to the customer's memory, I want to be very explicit and say, hey, I'm about to take this action because this is what you've done. Are you okay with that? So managing memory is much harder than actually building memory. The tech is pretty much out there. We have the technical chops to be able to build it. But we want to make sure we don't launch a memory object that doesn't respect customer consent, that doesn't feel very natural. And the same goes for data sharing between us and OpenAI, for example, right? Like that ground needs to settle before we can do something we that we want to expose to customers. And those are all very evolving conversations.
Yeah, I know Sam's been looking at a lot and doing some analysis of Dev Day from an OpenAI. But I think one follow-up question is, I think there's a big unanswered question around where the moat remains for a player like Booking.com. If you're now in the feed, right? And the user is actually okay. Signing in, giving consent. Yes, I now want to move forward in my Booking.com account. How much is actually be sharing with OpenAI? How much can they actually learn? You have all this, you have this big moat. You know these three different parts of memory. You know how to evolve with a customer. Why give that away to OpenAI? And at what point does that interaction on OpenAI move away from Booking.com and accommodate other elements outside of Booking.com's ecosystem, even if I've already signed in to
Yeah.
Booking.com?
So that's kind of the evolving conversation, right? Like how much data actually flows in through the organizations, and in the absence of letter of law, the answer is none, right? Uh, because there's more dimensions than just the commercial interest of the organization. There's more customer consent and so on and so forth. So that's one dimension of it. Second, travel is so much more than just finding the inspiration, right? Travel is usually a very expensive purchase that has a very real financial impact on most people uh, taking that trip. So there's aspects of operations, of customer service, and so on and so forth that is our specialization, right? Uh, we can solve travel problems as Booking.com with all of the infrastructure and the operational support and the ways in which knowing what can go wrong that are specifically our domain expertise, right? So the integration doesn't really take that away from Booking.com. In fact, I think that amplifies it because then we have more exposure of the brand. We have a deeper partnership. We are where our customers are. But then our specialty is not travel discovery. It's finishing your trip, right? So there's a lot of elements there that don't really get expressed with just the carousel.
I'm curious, do you guys see yourself, with this whole sort of new world that OpenAI is kind of building, where they're building this platform, where they've got this sort of almost like a daily agents or agentic system on their thing with Pulse and things like that? Do you become just a part of that? Or do you guys also see yourself as being like, okay, we're going to make the travel assistant, which is going to help you for everything, not just from booking the hotel, but telling me, popping up and telling me, hey, if you want to get from the hotel to here, here's how you can use Uber, or here's the train, which is going to be a lot faster today because there's a football match. Like, I'm really curious, like, how deep do you guys go into being the assistant, as opposed to just being the add-on for OpenAI or Google or Anthropic's assistant?
So I don't think that's an either or, right? I think both need to happen. We need to be good partners where our customers need us to be. That was kind of one of the big guiding principles on the OpenAI partnership, right? Like that's where our customers are, so that's where we're going to be, and that's where we're going to help. But at the same time, there's a lot of customers that are very directly on our platform. And there we want to also have the full offering of being able to take the end-to-end trip, being able to sort of manage that trip, get the right recommendations, so on and so forth. And even internally between the chat product and the conventional UX, we haven't seen an either or, right? Because we offer a chat, our users don't abandon the conventional funnel. Because we offer the conventional funnel, they don't abandon the chat. There's always going to be this mix of options, so to speak, which is the reality today as well. Today, you can find Booking.com through Google. You can come to Booking.com direct. You can find Booking.com through one of our affiliates. I think that ecosystem stays, right? And customers are going to be everywhere. And our stance is we want to be everywhere that the customers are
I guess
and go as deep as possible.
I guess what I mean though is, let me give you an example. Okay, I've arrived in a city. I've just gotten to the hotel. It's 11 p.m. at night. I need to order some food, right? I don't want to order the hotel food. Who do I ask for what's the number, or what's the, the DoorDash, the Uber Eats, like who am I going to for what's the local version of that if I'm in some city that's new to
Right.
me? Am I going to OpenAI, or am I going to you guys?
Now, I think this is where our ambition for the connected trip is evolving, right? We want to be able to service all aspects of the trip. We've now started with, we have been doing flights for a while. We have transport, we have attractions. We've now kind of seen that ecosystem mature, and it'll kind of continue to add all of these fine nuances as well around where do you get food, how do you order, and so on and so forth. We've started supporting non-bookable recommendations, as we like to call them, which is you want to take a walk to the park that's nearby. Can I tell you something more about it? That is now very much possible within our assistant and our trip planner already. And that will continue to get more and more depth. So the ambition is very much, yeah, we want to give you the full connected trip, not just the things that you can do with booking.
Interesting. Pranav, what would you? Okay, a lot of our listeners, like we mentioned, are starting out their journey in sort of integrating a lot of the things that you guys have done. Uh, let's go back a couple of years in time, and if you get in that time machine and you can go back to yourself 2 years ago, and you can sort of say, hey, make sure you yell at all your staff to not leave GPUs on, or whatever the advice is going to be, right? What is that advice going to be?
Don't start complicated. Start with the simplest, most painful problem you can find and the simplest, most obvious solution to that. We started with a pretty complicated tech stack. We're now in a good place with that tech stack, which we're very happy with. But we probably could have started something much simpler and seen how customers interact with it, right? So start simple, don't overcomplicate the stack. You're not going to have to pre-train models at the very first LLM launch you're about to do. You're probably going to be just fine with using APIs. So start there, find the product market fit, and then see what ecosystem you need.
Are you able to talk a little bit about that the cloud that you're using? I mean, if you're obviously a big open AI shop, you're using other models, you're doing your own intent models. But you talk about keep it simple, right? Keep the stack as simple as possible. Does that mean just go with Azure, right? In your case, because of the connection with OpenAI, is it as simple as that, or are you actually having to do more intense specification there?
I don't think so, right? Whatever works for you. If you're already in the Azure environment and you can access OpenAI through that, great. If you want to access it through the APIs, also great. Don't go changing about the full infrastructure just because there's this one use case that demands that you use a specific thing, because a lot of your business is going to be on other infrastructure regardless. So don't shift the company's entire cloud strategy from AWS to Azure just because you want to use the OpenAI endpoint, right? So yeah, start with the simplest. The stack will evolve. Don't take decisions that are one-way doors. Until you are very confident that that's the solution that you want to go with. Don't lock yourself in too early would be my advice.
Pranav, any lessons in terms of the team and critical decisions that probably should have been made earlier rather than later?
Upskill the immediate team first before upskilling anyone else because you need the domain experts to give the rest of the organization the confidence that you know what you're doing. That's one. Definitely upskill the rest. That's two. You're not going to be able to get to all of the use cases you want to work on. It's good to have helping hands because you need to move fast. That's two. Hire really good talent. That's three. That's really hard to find, admittedly, but there's no substitute for expertise. You're going to want to upskill a lot of the people in deep technicals that you already have, but have a bunch of experts that can guide that process really well. There's no substitute for that.
All right, Pranav, thank you very much for joining us. That's
Thank you.
fascinating story. And we're
Thank
looking
you.
forward
Super
to staying
fun.
in touch and following your journey.
Same here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Pranav. And special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Outshift by Cisco. You can learn more about their work on the Internet of Agents via their Linux Foundation project, agntcy.org. This open source project enables agents to work at scale across any vendor or framework with trusted and secure discovery, identity access, and observability. For more stories about the AI revolution, like and subscribe to the podcast and check out VentureBeat.com to sign up for our newsletters.